This story is titled The Unspoken Boundary. My name is Jake, and I'm 38 years old. I live in a small, cozy house in the suburbs of Denver, Colorado, with my girlfriend Clara. We've been together for 2 years now, and for the most part, it's been a relationship built on laughter, mutual respect, and a sense of partnership. But recently, something changed, a feeling in the pit of my stomach, a nagging unease that I couldn't quite shake. It all started innocently enough. Clara has always had a close-knit group of friends at work. I was never the jealous type. I understood that having friendships outside of the relationship was important. In fact, I often encouraged her to spend time with her coworkers. After all, she was great at her job, and I wanted her to feel supported and valued. One evening, as we were curled up on the couch watching a movie, Clara's phone buzzed. She reached for it absent-mindedly, giving me a quick smile before glancing at the screen. "It's Mike," she said, almost casually. "One of my coworkers." I nodded, not thinking much of it. Mike was a guy she had mentioned before, someone she'd worked closely with on a big project. I knew they were friends, nothing more, or so I thought. But that night, something shifted. Clara had been texting Mike a lot lately. The messages were seemingly harmless, work-related jokes, harmless banter, but over time, I started to notice something I hadn't before. Clara would often pause before answering her phone when we were together. She'd be a little quieter, almost secretive in the way she looked at her screen. The unease grew. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that I was overthinking things, but it didn't stop there. One day, as I was picking Clara up from work, I overheard her talking to Mike on the phone. Her voice was light, almost flirtatious. I couldn't make out the exact words, but the tone in her voice made my chest tighten. When she hung up and got into the car, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Clara," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Who was that?" She glanced at me with a quick, almost startled look. "It was Mike from work." "Why?" I hesitated, unsure of how to express the discomfort I was feeling. "It's just, I don't know. The way you were talking to him. It felt a little different." Clara laughed lightly, brushing it off. "Oh, Jake, you're being paranoid. We're just friends. Mike's been a great support at work, that's all." I nodded, but the doubt in my mind continued to grow. I trusted Clara, I really did, but something about this felt off. It wasn't just the phone calls or the constant texting. It was the way she seemed to open up to him. It wasn't long after that when I found out the full extent of what was happening. Clara and I were having dinner together when she mentioned, almost offhandedly, that she'd been venting to Mike about our relationship. "He's such a good listener," she said, twirling her fork in her spaghetti. "I can talk to him about anything. You know, sometimes it's easier to talk to someone who isn't emotionally involved. He just gives me a fresh perspective." My heart sank. "Wait, what? You've been talking to Mike about us?" Clara looked up, slightly surprised by my reaction. "Yeah, just some stuff here and there. You know, things we go through as a couple. It helps me process my feelings." I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. "What kind of things?" She shrugged, seemingly oblivious to the tension in the air. "Nothing serious, just some disagreements we've had, little things that bug me, like how we don't always spend enough time together or how we communicate sometimes." I felt a lump form in my throat. She was sharing the most intimate, vulnerable aspects of our relationship with someone else, someone who wasn't me. A person who didn't have the same emotional investment in our bond, and yet he was hearing things about us that I thought were private. "Clara," I said, my voice tight, "I'm not comfortable with you talking to him about our relationship. It feels wrong." She looked taken aback as though she couldn't understand why I was upset. "Jake, come on. He's just a friend. Why are you making this into something it's not? I'm just venting." Her words stung. She brushed off my feelings like they didn't matter. I felt the familiar feeling of frustration building in my chest. "I'm not saying you can't have friends, Clara," I said, trying to remain calm. "But this feels like a boundary you're crossing. He's not just a coworker. He's someone you're confiding in about things that should stay between us. It makes me uncomfortable." Clara sighed, setting her fork down. "You're being so sensitive. It's not like I'm having an affair. I just need someone to talk to sometimes. Can't you understand that?" The words hit me harder than I expected. "I understand that you need someone to talk to," I said quietly. "But I don't think it should be him. You've got me, don't you? I'm the person you should be talking to about this stuff." Clara's expression hardened slightly. "Jake, I'm allowed to have friends. You can't control who I talk to, and you certainly can't control what I share with them." I felt my frustration bubbling to the surface. I'm not trying to control you, Clara. I just want you to respect my feelings. This feels like a line has been crossed. She crossed her arms defensively. I think you're just overreacting. If you trust me, then you shouldn't be worried about who I talk to. You're being unreasonable. Her words stung more than I was willing to admit. She wasn't taking my concerns seriously, and I was starting to feel small, like my feelings didn't matter. I was beginning to question myself. Was I really overreacting? Was I just being insecure? But deep down, I knew I wasn't. It wasn't about trusting Clara. It was about setting boundaries in a relationship that should be respected. The days that followed were filled with tension. We'd sit together in silence, each of us processing the conversation in our own way. I felt a growing distance between us, and I couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of something bigger, a rift that couldn't be healed. Was I wrong to set boundaries? Was I asking for too much? Or was I simply trying to protect something I cherished? Our relationship. The following days felt like a blur, as if I was moving through life in a fog. Clara and I barely spoke to each other, and when we did, it was mostly about trivial things. What we were having for dinner, whether we needed to pick up groceries. But there was no warmth, no connection like there used to be. The tension between us was palpable, thickening the air in every room we entered. I spent a lot of time thinking about everything. I asked myself if I was being too controlling, too sensitive. And yet, every time I tried to justify Clara's actions in my mind, I came back to the same conclusion. I wasn't wrong for feeling hurt. The thought of Clara venting to Mike, sharing the most vulnerable parts of our relationship with him, still gnawed at me. It felt like a betrayal, a small but significant breach of trust. One afternoon, after a few days of silence, I decided to confront Clara again. My thoughts were spinning, and I knew that if I didn't speak up now, I would only continue to feel more isolated. I wanted to get to the bottom of this, find out if there was a way forward, or if our relationship was truly on the verge of collapse. I found Clara in the living room, scrolling through her phone. I took a deep breath, walked over, and sat next to her. She glanced up at me with a hesitant look, as if she was waiting for me to speak first. I wasn't sure how to start, but I knew I had to be honest. "Clara," I said, my voice softer this time. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation the other night, about you talking to Mike." She nodded, but there was a slight wariness in her eyes. "Jake, we've already talked about this. It's not a big deal." "No, I don't think we have talked about it enough," I replied, my voice shaking with the mix of frustration and hurt that had been building up inside me. "It is a big deal, Clara. You're confiding in him about things that are between us, things that should stay between us." Clara looked down, her fingers nervously tapping on her phone. "I get it, Jake, but Mike's just a friend. I'm not asking you to share every little thing with me, am I?" I shook my head, feeling like I was losing control of the conversation. "It's not about sharing every little thing. It's about trust, Clara. It's about respect. You've crossed a line by talking to him about our relationship, and I feel like I don't even know where I stand anymore." Her expression softened, but there was still a defensiveness in her eyes. "I'm sorry you feel that way," she said quietly. "I never meant to hurt you. I don't know. I've always talked to Mike when I needed someone to vent to. I didn't think it would bother you this much." "It's not just that you vented to him," I said, feeling the frustration creep back in. "It's the fact that you didn't even think to tell me. I felt completely blindsided when I found out, and you just acted like it wasn't a big deal." Clara sat back, her face softening as she finally looked me in the eyes. "I didn't realize how much this was bothering you. Honestly, I didn't. I thought you trusted me, Jake. I didn't think sharing some frustrations would be an issue." "I do trust you," I replied, the words coming out more softly than I intended. "But trust isn't just about being faithful. It's about transparency, too. It's about feeling like we're both on the same team." Clara was quiet for a long time, and I could see that she was trying to process everything I'd said. I waited, giving her space to think, but my heart was pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure if we could fix this. The doubt had taken root, and it felt like it might be too late to pull it out. Finally, Clara spoke. "I hear you, Jake. I really do. And I don't want to make you feel like you're not a priority. I'm sorry if I've made you feel that way." The sincerity in her voice made my heart ache. "I just don't want to feel like I'm the last person you turn to when something's wrong. I want to be the one you lean on. I want to feel like we're in this together." Clara nodded, her eyes filled with regret. "You are, Jake. You're my partner, and I'm sorry for making you feel like you weren't. There was a long silence between us, both of us lost in our thoughts. I could tell that Clara was genuinely trying to understand where I was coming from, but I still wasn't sure if it was enough. I want to believe you, I said, my voice quieter now, but I need to know that this won't happen again. I need to feel like I'm your person, the one you confide in first. If we can't get on the same page about this, I don't know what'll happen. Clara reached out and took my hand, her grip firm. Jake, I promise I'll be more mindful. I don't want to hurt you anymore. You are the one I want to talk to about everything. I've just been so caught up in work, in trying to keep things together, but I get it now. You deserve more. Her words were soft, yet there was a weight to them. It felt like she was finally hearing me, truly understanding the depth of my discomfort. But was it enough to rebuild the trust that had been cracked? Would we be able to move past this, or was this the beginning of the end? As I looked into her eyes, I realized that relationships weren't always easy. They required work, compromise, and sometimes uncomfortable conversations. But I wasn't ready to give up on us just yet. I still loved her. And maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to the place where we were once stronger than ever. The future felt uncertain, but I was willing to try, for us. If this story resonates with you, like, comment, and subscribe.